Syria. Joining me from Capitol Hill is Congressman Brad Sherman of California. He's a senior member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Thank you, Congressman, for being here. In addition to the president's meetings with congressional leaders today, administration officials are going to hold briefings on the Hill Thursday. What do you hope to hear from the president and his team?
Well, I respect that the president has taken effective action. I think that his caution is wise. I think we should be taking that we should be using our Air Force against ISIS, and we need to be mindful of the fact that not only is ISIS evil, but most of ISIS's enemies are also evil, including the Assad regime and the al-Nusra Front, which is a part of al-Qaeda Central. I'd like to hear that the president supports the U.S. Constitution and the War Powers Act, which would say that if you're going to conduct military activities for over 60 days, and in some cases that's 90 days, that you get congressional approval for what action you're taking. And while we're working for democracy around the world, we have to respect the Constitution and democracy here in the United States.
The president hasn't said that he's going to seek authorization. They've repeatedly used this language of valuing consultations. Is that the wrong tack here?
Valuing consultation, you know, he confers with foreign leaders, he confers with professors and experts, and it's good that he does that. But Congress is in a different role than some deputy assistant secretary who might have some insight into what the policy ought to be. Congress has to vote before we undertake military action for over 60 or 90 days. And that vote ought to confine the president to air action and maybe give him, or I think he already has the authorization, for a few days of efforts to, say, rescue a pilot or some extraordinary ground action like that.
So a very clear answer from one voice on the Hill there. We may need congressional authorization here. Certainly that is Congressman Sherman's take. The president hasn't yet said whether he plans to expand airstrikes into Syria. Another very important point that you just made, Congressman, is about collaborating with the enemies of ISIS. That, of course, includes Bashar al-Assad's government, which is demanded to be looped in before any airstrikes in Syria happen. Working with Assad, is that something that would ever be appropriate?
We should certainly have private discussions with the Assad regime, let them know in general what we plan to do, and to make sure that we don't end up in a shooting, an unintentional shooting with Assad and his air defense forces. At the same time, I don't think Assad deserves what he's seeking, which is the diplomatic recognition of us treating him as the rightful government of all of Syria.
A brand new NBC News Wall Street Journal poll shows 40% of Americans wanting America to be less active in international affairs. Do you think ISIS and more action against ISIS is going to be a problematic political liability going into the election cycle in light of that?
Well, the American people want us to take action against ISIS. They also do not want to see significant American casualties. And that's why we should limit our activity to action in the air. Boots on the ground, soldiers on the front line. That will lead perhaps to a level of casualties that we'd want to avoid. The American people need to understand that unless they're willing to incur very substantial casualties, they cannot demand that we completely destroy ISIS immediately, because you cannot do that without substantial casualties.
And even as of now, the president has said no boots on the ground, but he's said that in the context of combat troops. We'll see exactly how slippery that definition proves to be. Congressman Brad Sherman, really appreciate your insights today.
Good to be with you.
And just ahead, today's big tech story is developing right now as Apple makes its most important announcement in years.
Today, we are launching the biggest advancement in the history of iPhone.
Tim Cook's under intense pressure to live up to the Steve Jobs legacy. Is he delivering? We've got a live update up ahead.
To show it to you.
Musical chairs.